Hello. We're now going to come back to order. It is 11:47 a.m. and we're going to go ahead and proceed with our second panel, where we will examine the federal government utilization and safeguard implementation of facial recognition technology. Each panelist will have 7 minutes to speak, and following the conclusion of the panel presentation, again, commissioners will have the opportunity to ask questions within the allotted period of time, and I will go ahead and recognize you, commissioners who wish to speak. Of course, I'll strictly enforce the time allotments given to each panelist to present his or her statement, and unless we did not receive your testimony until today, again, you may assume that we have read it, so please summarize it. We will appreciate that. That way you can make the best use of your 7 minutes. Panelists, please notice the system of warning lights that we have set up. When the light turns from green to yellow, that means 2 minutes remain. When the light turns red, panelists should conclude their statements, so you do not risk me cutting you off mid-sentence. And my fellow commissioners and I will do our part to keep our questions and comments concise. And in the order in which they will speak, the panelists are Peter Mina, Deputy Officer for Programs and Compliance, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, Arun Vumori, Program Manager, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate, Diane Sabatino, Acting Executive Assistant Commissioner, Office of Field Operations, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Jason Lim, Identity Management Capability Manager at the Transportation Security Administration. And I'm going to now ask each of you to raise your right hand to be sworn in. Will you swear and confirm that the information that you are about to provide us is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? Okay, affirmative from all. Mr. Mina, you can go ahead and begin.
Good morning, everyone. Chairwoman Garza, Vice Chair Nurse, and members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the Department of Homeland Security's use of biometric technology and data responsibly in support of the Homeland Security mission while preserving and protecting civil rights and civil liberties. As the chairwoman said, my name is Peter Mina, and I'm the Deputy Officer for Programs and Compliance at the Department's Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. DHS uses biometrics such as fingerprints, iris, and face recognition to enable operational missions, both to support national security and public safety, and deliver benefits and services with greater efficiency and accuracy. Face recognition technology can serve as an important tool, and it is vital that these programs use the technology in a way that safeguards our constitutional rights and values. The policies and procedures we follow ensure that the Department's use of this technology is free from discrimination and in full compliance with the law, ensuring that we retain the public's trust. The Department's broad and diverse mission results in millions of interactions with individuals each day. It is critical that DHS utilizes face recognition technology responsibly. I hope this perspective further informs your deliberations, rounding out your understanding of the many equities, including individual rights, that DHS must consider whenever the Department takes action, especially with technology and data that has a very real impact on individuals. I'd like to next focus a little bit on something that Dr. Goodwin mentioned in her testimony, which is our facial recognition and face capture directive, which was recently issued in September of last year. This directive establishes an enterprise policy for the authorized use of face recognition and face capture technologies by DHS. It applies the use of face recognition and face capture technologies for any purpose and limits the use of face analysis technology, including technologies used by federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, non-U.S. governments, and international entities operated by or on behalf of the Department. And so I want to walk through a few of the key points in the directive. This directive prescribes several key points. It dictates that all use of face recognition and face capture technologies will be thoroughly tested to ensure that there's no unintended bias or disparate impact in accordance with national standards. It directs a review of all existing uses of this technology and to conduct periodic testing and evaluation of all systems to meet performance goals. It requires that U.S. citizens be afforded the right to opt out of face recognition for specific non-law enforcement uses. It prohibits face recognition from being used as the sole basis for any law or civil enforcement related action. And it establishes a process for department oversight offices, including the Privacy Office, my office, the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, the Science and Technology Directorate, and the Office of the Chief Information Officer to review all new uses of face recognition and face capture technologies before they are implemented. And so this directive was a vital step forward for the department in establishing a framework for proactively assessing the technologies being utilized and ensuring they're being employed responsibly. Fulsome consideration by my office, operational agencies and offices, DHS leadership, and others is critical to ensure we get it right from the beginning and protect the rights of the individuals we serve and the viability of DHS operations. Operators, researchers, civil rights advocates, and policymakers must work together to prevent algorithms from leading to racial, gender, or other impermissible biases in the use of face recognition technology. Successful and appropriate use of all biometric technology, including face recognition, requires ongoing oversight and quality assurance, achieved through a close relationship between operational users and oversight offices such as CRCL. And you see that, I think, by the representation on the panel today. It is really a partnership across the department, and that partnership is critical to achieving this critical mission. And so again, as I mentioned, when deploying biometric systems, civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy must be integrated into their foundations. And that's really how this works most effectively, is to get involved early and often. And so CRCL has been and continues to be at the forefront of this engagement with DHS agencies and offices to ensure that the DHS use of face recognition is consistent with civil rights and civil liberties law and policy. We provide advice and oversight to the department's efforts to ensure this technology works to reduce the potential for racial, ethnic, or gender bias and other types of discrimination. In addition, CRCL investigates complaints that include allegations of racial profiling or other impermissible bias. And so I can't give a comprehensive list of every factor that we consider when we look at facial recognition technology, but I want to highlight a few things for the Commission. So obviously one of the main things we look at is discrimination. Biometric technologies, either in their design or use, can result in impermissible discriminatory impact. And the presence of algorithmic bias has been highlighted in recent U.S. government analysis. We've been talking a lot about the NIST report. We've looked at that as well. And then also that NIST report, also, while there is a noted substantial bias or substantial demographic effects in many algorithms, the NIST report also highlights the demographic differentials are smaller or undetectable with more accurate, high-performing algorithms in certain applications. Even when using such high-performing algorithms, as DHS does, testing and validation must be a constant in the operational lifecycle. The next thing I want to touch on, which is also mentioned in the first panel, is scale. With certain biometric modalities, a non-trivial percentage of the population cannot present suitable features to participate in certain biometric systems. For example, many people have fingers that simply don't print well, or a disability which would limit their participation. Even if people unable to be fingerprinted, for example, represented 1% of the population, that may translate into massive inconvenience and suspicion for that minority. The same scaling issues present when using face recognition technologies, making it critical that we identify potential matching issues and address them quickly. The other thing I want to highlight is perception. While we need to guard against actual and perceived bias in biometric systems, we need to address perceptions that biometrics the department collects for legitimate missions are being used to conduct unlawful surveillance, or tracking of individuals. DHS has a responsibility to actively promote a common understanding of the technology and the department's use and non-use of it. CRCL engages with stakeholders in order to provide feedback to the department and agency leadership regarding the impacts or consequences of policies, programs, activities, and initiatives. And then lastly, there's redress. Individuals must have an opportunity to correct both their biographic and biometric information so that incorrect biometric matching or other adverse consequences can be effectively and timely challenged and databases corrected. In addition, CRCL, as I mentioned before, has an established complaint process to investigate allegations of violations of civil rights and civil liberties. And again, one of the things that we look at is looking forward, how we get involved in those projects, how we get involved from the ground up. And then again, as those future and projects develop, we're going to remain engaged with advocates, technologists, and our operational partners to ensure that civil rights and civil liberties protections are both effective and sufficient. And thank you so much for your time and look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mina. We're going to now turn to Mr. Vimuri. You can proceed.
Good morning, Chairwoman Garza, Vice Chairman Norse, and members of the Commission of the Civil Rights, Commission on Civil Rights. I'm honored to brief you today. My name is Arun Vimuri, and I'm a Senior Engineering Advisor at the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate. I serve as the Senior Advisor specifically for biometric and identity technologies. In this role, I'm responsible for identifying research needs and coordinating the efforts among multiple international experts on developing technologies to help close different capability gaps for different missions that are supported by the department. I also provide leadership to perform test and evaluation of cutting-edge new technologies, including facial recognition, to make sure that we have appropriate information to understand how the technologies work, their capabilities, and their limitations. I've worked in the space of biometrics for more than 20 years. In 2003, Congress established the Science and Technology Directorate as the research and development arm of the Department of Homeland Security. The Undersecretary of Science and Technology serves as the senior advisor to the Secretary of Homeland Security, and S&T conducts research, development, test, and evaluation of new technologies and capabilities. We work on science that strengthens the technologies and capabilities the department requires to help ensure the security and prosperity of our people. Our work on biometric and identity technologies includes facial recognition, and we apply a rigorous and deliberative process to research, test, and evaluate these technologies to inform components of how the specific technologies work in the specific use cases that they are operating in. Facial recognition technology is relatively easy to use but has not always been accurate. Recent advances in machine learning have enabled some commercial face recognition technologies to make dramatic gains in accuracy. These technologies hold immense potential to help improve the effectiveness of different DHS operations. However, realizing the potential operations also requires careful analysis and planning, as performance in machine learning-based capabilities are affected by multiple factors. By some measures, facial recognition technology is among the most carefully tested AI technologies, and a significant portion of what we've learned has actually been gained through support from DHS S&T. DHS S&T funds face recognition research, testing, and evaluation through distinct channels, including through the National Science Foundation Center for Identification Technology Research, which performs early-stage research on biometric and identity technologies. We also co-fund the National Institute of Standards and Technology facial recognition test and technology evaluations. They changed their acronym recently. I keep wanting to say the old one. And we also, which focuses more on biometric algorithm testing in particular. And then we also importantly established something that's specific and unique to the department. We established the Maryland Test Facility, a test laboratory that performs applied research and carries out targeted evaluations of integrated end-to-end biometric capabilities. So not just an evaluation on the algorithm, we look at the process, we look at the cameras, we look at all the different software that are integrated throughout the entire process, including the portions that require human decision-making. This portfolio allows us to answer key questions about facial recognition technology to inform and advise DHS and its operational components on mission effectiveness and answer questions on performance to inform oversight. The performance of facial recognition technologies is determined by multiple subsystems. Errors can be made anywhere in the process, from the camera to the face detection software, image quality systems, liveness checking, to the facial recognition algorithm, or even the decision logic that determines whether the system believes that a person may be the same person. Technology tests carried out by NIST have shown that top-performing facial recognition algorithms make few errors on previously acquired faces. However, having a top-performing facial recognition algorithm alone does not guarantee accuracy and equitability of the technology and operations. Assessing a technology within the specific use case requires scenario testing and evaluations in operations. Testing performed at the Maryland Test Facility simulate full facial recognition capabilities in simulated use cases, informed by DHS operational needs, and they're complemented by operational evaluations. DHS works in collaboration with our DHS operational components to make sure that we are developing tests that are actually indicative of real-world operational processes. We have applied our research and testing evaluation to multiple government and commercial systems. These systems, the work that we've done and the findings that we've presented have also been published in peer-reviewed scientific publications, at conferences, and technical papers. We've also briefed out our results and findings to industry and academic associations to help inform innovation so that commercial and other academics can help develop new technologies that address the capability limitations that we find through our testing. Through comprehensive assessments, we work to inform and empower the department to help improve their ability to identify accurate, effective, and fair technologies that align with their statutory and regulatory missions. We are also actively engaged in leading the development of international standards aimed at establishing guidelines for the effective and responsible use of the technologies. Standards are really important because they help with the assessment of facial recognition technologies, because they ensure that different stakeholders have a common understanding of terms and metrics. To help standardize the way we talk about biometric system performance across demographic groups, we're also leading the development of a new international standard known as ISO IEC 19795-10. There will not be a quiz at the end. Through efforts like this, we seek to promote transparency, accountability, and equitability of these technologies. The DHS directive on facial recognition capture and or face capture and facial recognition technology, published in September of 2023, requires DHS S&T to perform evaluations of new facial recognition capabilities. We plan to ensure that we evaluate these deployed systems with the same rigor we've evaluated research and government systems before. Our recent assessments of the TSA credential authentication technology for system effectiveness, efficiency, and equitability serves an example of this approach. And as part of this process, we've applied both comprehensively laboratory, scenario, and operational evaluation, so we get a full, more holistic picture on the overall performance of the system, not only to help TSA identify ways to improve the performance of their systems, but also to inform oversight. In conclusion, the responsible use of facial recognition technologies by federal agencies requires a concerted effort encompassing rigorous research, inclusive testing methodologies, and international collaboration with experts. Appropriate guidance, as well as appropriate policies to help ensure that we are doing it effectively. By adhering to these principles, we ensure that the technology serves not only a use for security, but also safeguarding privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties for all Americans. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bamuri. We're going to now hear from Ms. Sabatino. Please proceed.
Chairwoman Garza and members and staff of the Commission, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of U.S. Customs and Border Protection's efforts to better secure our nation and facilitate lawful travel through facial biometric comparison technology. By leveraging biometric identification capabilities, we've essentially automated a previously manual process to verify the identity of travelers entering the United States. In building the Traveler Verification Service, known as TVS, which provides back-end facial biometrics matching, we've implemented facial biometrics at all ports of entry supporting international air arrivals, including all of our pre-clearance locations. And we've established facial biometrics at 40 seaports and all of our pedestrian lanes at both the southwest border and northern border land ports of entry. But since the outset, in working and using facial biometrics, we've worked closely with our partners here at the table, but also with the National Institute of Standards and Technology to ensure high-performing algorithms for matching, and immediately saw a high rate of successful matches. A NIST test earlier this month showed the NEC algorithm, which we use, accuracy at 99.88%. And our data analysis also indicates virtually no discernible differential with respect to demographics, with high technical match rates across the globe. We achieve the accuracy and speed of matching by building galleries of existing traveler photos from passports, visa applications, and prior Department of Homeland Security encounters. So if a traveler cannot be matched by our biometric facial comparison technology, they simply undergo, a manual identity check consistent with existing requirements for entry into the United States. And to date, more than 470 million travelers have been processed using biometric facial comparison technology, allowing us to biometrically confirm more than 325,000 overstays in the U.S. and identify more than 1,900 imposters attempting to enter the U.S. But privacy is not an afterthought, and travelers should not have to sacrifice their privacy for processing efficiency or convenience. As we implement any new technology, the privacy protections and data security are built in from the very beginning of developing the program. And our primary use of facial biometrics comparison technology is at a time and a place where an individual would normally expect to present themselves for identity verification. We inform travelers through various channels regarding when photos will be taken for identity verification purposes and whether they can opt out if they're eligible to do so. And furthermore, we conduct ongoing public awareness campaigns and provide details through privacy impact assessments and notices. Continuous testing and evaluation remain integral to enhancing our capabilities and ensuring that our frontline personnel have the best tools possible to increase their focus on situational awareness to better protect our borders. TVS, I mentioned our facial biometric matching system, is just one of a number of tools that we use to inform our frontline officers in order for them to make the best decisions. So an officer is making the decision, and our officers remain our most valuable resource in the entire process. And as CBP, we face incredibly dynamic and ever-evolving threat landscapes. So ensuring that our frontline personnel have the right tools to do their jobs is of paramount importance to us. And while facial biometrics comparison technology is critical to our operations, many other tools, including mobile applications, intelligence, non-intrusive inspection systems, and canine operations, are also in place to secure our border. However, nothing will replace the keen intuition and the skills of the officer making the decision. They will always have the final say in the inspection's next steps with a traveler. But biometrics has and will remain another tool in our tool belt to use. And today, we continue to look to industry and other foreign partners, as well as U.S. entities, again, none more important than my colleagues here on the panel, to identify best practices. And one example would be the Biometrics Institute. It's an international organization comprised of government, industry, and academia that's established the good practice framework, an expert reference guide for designing and implementing biometric systems and programs. So not only have we shared our best practices with the Biometric Institute and through other international forums, we also have learned through these international engagements because we want to ensure that we have visibility and the opportunity to continually improve and help establish high global standards. We certainly look well beyond the work we do every day to ensure that we avoid blind spots and potential bias due to the limitations of our own geographic footprint, as well as our stakeholders. And moving forward, we're going to continue to work closely with those key stakeholders, including NIST, Congress, industry, and our travel partners, to seek the most innovative technologies, streamline our business processes, and strengthen our border security operations. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sabatino. Mr. Lim? You can proceed.
So good afternoon, Chairman Garza and members and staff of the Commission. It's really an honor to be here, and thank you for this opportunity to engage with you. Today on Transportation Security Administration's implementation of facial recognition technology to improve security and passenger experience at our checkpoint. So kind of echoing what the previous panelists have said, more than any other type of technology, I believe it's important to understand the particular use case when talking about facial recognition. In other words, how is it being used? The answer to that question really drives everything about how you implement the technology and the processes and policies around it. So at TSA, facial recognition is not used for surveillance, investigation, or any other law enforcement uses. TSA has a very specific and limited use case that's well-defined and constrained to a single point of interaction at the checkpoint. That is to confirm who you are before you enter into the checkpoint for screening. A critical step to verifying your identity is ensuring that the passenger's face, the live face, matches the ID photo that they just presented, right? So this means trying to match a small photo of a stranger on an ID to a person you're seeing for the first time. So repeat this for up to 200 times an hour, extrapolate this to about 2.5 million times a day across the TSA enterprise. And this traditionally has been manual, this process. So in the past few years, TSA has been automating this specific step in the process in order to enhance passenger experience and improve identity verification, which is a linchpin to TSA's risk-based security regime. As we have done this, we have put privacy and civil rights as our core design principles. This has led to a suite of privacy-enhancing functionalities and processes. For example, one, your live photo as well as the ID scan are deleted upon match. We don't keep it. Your photo capture, the matching that happens, and the deletion of that photo and the ID scan all happen at the edge. By that I mean it happens on that local machine that you're interfacing right then and there. without any of the biometrics data being sent upstream to any centralized, back-end databases. Our device's camera only take the photo when there's a specific action to trigger the photo capture. This is called active capture. And it's a feature that we designed in. That means that the camera is not constantly on and it's scanning the environment for some face to come into the field of vision. There has to be an explicit action for you to turn on the camera and take the picture. And most importantly, you can always opt out of facial recognition by declining to have your photo taken. This will not impact your place in the line or cause undue delays in your screening process. And when you opt out, our officers will literally turn off the camera to ensure that your photo is not even accidentally captured. And we have posted physical signs along the queue and nearby our devices to inform the passengers of their right to opt out. And additionally, we have integrated this opt-out language, right, into the passenger-facing user interface screen itself, so that we want to maximize the opportunity for passenger to know that they have the option to decline the photo. The match result is presented to the TSA officer as a part of the larger set of data for the officer to use his or her experience, training, and contextual judgment to determine that someone is who they say they are. In other words, human judgment is always in the loop and the last word on any security decision. And finally, we have published privacy impact assessments that lay out in detail how we have implemented this technology and what we do with your data. In fact, we have published multiple privacy impact assessments, held several roundtables with privacy and civil rights advocacy groups over the years as we explored this technology. It's also critical that our facial recognition technology performs equally well across all demographics and lighting conditions at different airports. This is key when you're talking about a very diverse population of 2.5 million passengers every day. So therefore, we worked with our DHS Science and Technology Directorate colleagues, especially with Arun Vemuri, for his lab to independently test our specific system end-to-end across multiple dimensions. This means not just the matching algorithm, as he pointed out, but also the camera, how we process the image, how the matching happens, the usability, and the user interface, and human factors, and all those different dimensions to specifically understand any performance differentials across age, gender, and race. But we're not satisfied with just one test. We have engaged in continuous testing and post-implementation reviews, including, as the previous panel pointed out, testing in real-world conditions in our operational checkpoints. In fact, both DHS S&T and TSA's own independent test authority have performed multiple tests and analysis on our device over the years. And further, we have recently expanded our analysis, for performance differentials across demographics groups with a larger sample size, with more granular demographics classification to continually ensure that our technology do not perform less accurately for specific groups. And in addition to the privacy impact assessment, we have also published the TSA Biometrics Roadmap back in 2018, TSA Identity Management Roadmap in 2022 that lays out our overall approach to improve identity security using biometrics, and we are very happy to share these with the Commission. Moving forward, please be assured that TSA will continue to work closely with key stakeholders and partners to continually improve our security while enhancing the passenger experience and safeguarding your privacy and civil rights and civil liberties. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Lim and the rest of the panelists. I do want to acknowledge that we have, before I open it up for questionings, that we do have Vice Chair Nurse on the phone. Is that correct?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. If anyone would like to start. Commissioner Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is for you, Mr. Mina. It's a structural question related to some concerns voiced at the beginning of this presentation today. You're at DHS, right? And you have guidelines presumably related to these issues in place now.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
If DOJ, Department of Justice, were to interface with your department, either through the Civil Rights Division or Office of Legal Counsel, and have guidelines that were inconsistent with yours or different than yours, theirs would ultimately, their direction would replace yours, correct?
So while we certainly get, and obviously I don't want to speak for the Department of Justice, but I think that while we certainly get guidance from DOJ and we coordinate, we do have distinct authorities, and I think that there are reasons why our directive would coexist with a DOJ directive on facial recognition, for example.
Is that because their view already is consistent with yours? And
I just don't want to speak for DOJ at this point. I think that that's something that certainly we would work closely, as you mentioned, with the Civil Rights Division to coordinate. But I think that's, again, I think that our directive issued in September of last year, stands on its own as it relates to our use cases. I think that's the important part.
when you say it stands on its own, it means wholly developed by DHS.
Right, wholly developed by DHS, right.
Okay. My next series of questions is from Ms. Sabatino. You talked about the biometric capture. I assume since this is a facial recognition hearing, you refer primarily to a facial capture, right? Or, I mean, I just don't know.
Our facial biometric comparison technology, it uses a facial recognition algorithm, but it is a service that builds galleries based on advanced passenger information. So it is more comprehensive than the algorithm itself, and why we refer to it as such, but it is facial.
But there's like a harvesting process of facial images, I assume. For example, does it happen at an administrative arrest? Do you do biometric capture then?
So how we leverage our business use case, most significant use case is for arrivals to the U.S., and there's two means to do that. In our air and maritime environment, we receive air passenger information from commercial carriers, and leveraging that advanced passenger information, we will then build galleries, either establish U.S. passport photos, visa photos, or prior DHS encounters, and build that gallery and match as the individuals arrive based on the documentation they present and then the image that they present. In our land border environment, we do not build galleries. We do a one-to-one matching with the document that the individual presents with the RFID that's read or when we swipe the document.
Okay, so I understand the passenger, like a Dulles on British Airways. But what I'm asking about specifically is during an administrative arrest, does DHS capture a facial image? Yes or no?
So any individual that we take into custody, we would capture an image of the individual.
Okay. What about an apprehension?
So I'm not sure the context of apprehension, in terms.
Well,
what
I can.
specifically?
DHS has a glossary helpfully on the internet, and they just make a distinction between administrative arrest and apprehension. I'm wondering if that's something you also capture the facial recognition or facial imagery.
Anytime an individual is taken into custody.
What about an administrative encounter without taking into custody?
An administrative encounter is defined by any individual that arrives, foreign nationals, U.S. citizens can opt out, but any foreign national that arrives at a U.S. port of entry, we capture their image.
Okay, what if they walked across, not at a port of entry? What if you administrative encounter with somebody who did not arrive at a port of entry?
Are you referring to individuals who arrive in between the ports of entry?
Or show up in San Antonio, for example, and you have an administrative encounter. Do you take facial data at that point?
Okay. But with respect to individuals in the interior, it's not where the Office of Field Operation operates. We operate at the ports of entry. Our colleagues in the Border Patrol in between the ports of entry. Individuals crossing the border, essentially, is where we would encounter them, which means arriving at an airport via a cruise ship, small vessel, or vehicle, or pedestrian crossing.
What about an asylee? Do you capture facial recognition for an asylee?
Yes, any individual that is arriving to a port of entry.
Diplomatic passports? Do you,
Diplomats are exempt in certain instances, yes.
all instances or just certain?
It's certain categories. I believe it's A's and G's.
Okay. At book-in processing, when you book them in to a detention facility, is facial data captured then?
I would have to defer to ICE enforcement and removal operations.
Are you familiar with the DHS SAVE database, Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements database?
That is not a database that we employ.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you.
I do have a quick follow-up question as somebody who lives on the border and crosses the border all the time in Texas. We just heard that TSA does not keep those images. Is that the same for when somebody is crossing a port of entry? They're an American citizen. They have their image captured. Does that go into database? What happens with that image?
So U.S. citizens, the photos are deleted well within 12 hours of them crossing the border. They're retained potentially just for evaluation, but they're often deleted long before the 12-hour mark. Foreign nationals, and this goes back to when we implemented U.S. Visit back in 2004, the images are not retained in the Traveler Verification Service. They are transmitted over to the ident system where they're retained. I believe the time frame is 75 years.
Okay. And I'll just ask one other follow-up question of our DHS folks about mandatory training for FRT use by staff. What kind of training does that look like?
I think certainly in any, and treating the facial biometrics like we would treat any data point that we have in our systems. We have overarching training with respect to privacy, system security, cybersecurity, protecting classified information, but also inclusion and diversity are all like overarching training. With respect to facial recognition technology, we have, based on a GAO report, I believe that was completed last year, working through the development of some training that we expect to have implemented by April 24, so in the next several weeks, hopefully, have that implemented and up and running. I think in terms of as a tool that we use, what we focus on with our officers and the teams that use the biometric facial comparison technology, like any other data point that we have, the primary consideration for them is that is not the sole reason that an individual is subject to any further actions with respect to their inspection itself. That we have multiple data points, and the most important one being the interview with a frontline CBP officer to make a determination.
Thank you. Or somebody else want to answer that? Mr.
I just
Mina?
wanted to, thank you, Chairwoman. I just wanted to highlight the policy piece that sort of also supplements that. So like, for example, and these were also cited in the GAO report, but for example, I know there was a discussion earlier about First Amendment protected activity. And so there is a memorandum that's been issued, and it's more general guidance, granted as opposed to more specific training, but it does also touch on use of biometrics, which is, a memorandum related to collection of information related to First Amendment protected activity, issued in 2019. And then also just our general policies on non-discrimination in law enforcement and screening activities, I think also sort of touch on these issues as well.
I'm going to recognize Commissioner McIntyre.
Thank you. And first, thank you for being here, and thank you for your service. No, really. It's actually delightful to hear this presentation, in which y'all did. I had a question about TSA and the optionality of the photos. I thought it was optional. And isn't it not optional? And don't travelers have the opportunity to know that they have the option not to have their picture taken?
Yeah, he testified.
Where does that happen?
It happens right there at the checkpoint when you actually encounter. It's the first time you encounter TSA is a point called travel document checker, and that's where our device is to actually confirm your identity. And you have signages nearby or along the queue as you wait. We also have language on the screen itself that you will see when you actually step in front of the machine that says you have a right to opt out or something to that effect.
So maybe my question would be better placed if I said, I just came from the airport and I had no sense that was available. So perhaps it's an implementation question, and I'm happy to take many pictures of TSA agents and share them with you where that is not known. I hear the testimony,
Right.
but I can assure you, having flown through many places. Second, can I just ask, are the notifications available in other languages besides English and Spanish? Or actually, other languages besides English?
Yes, we have signages in English and Spanish. We also have handouts in English and Spanish, but not other languages other than that. So it really operations, checkpoints are so different from each airport, but the guidance is when you implement this technology, as you said, this technology is actually in operational deployment right now, so it's not everywhere. So it's actually not across, it's not fully saturated across TSA enterprise. So there'll be gaps, right, where some airports you'll encounter, some airports you won't. Having said that, the signages are located along the queues as you flow into the checkpoint, near the machine, so hopefully nearby to the signs, and also the signage itself is a digital signage that's on the screen that's attached to the machine. Sure.
Commissioner Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll echo my colleague's observation from his own experience that I have never felt like I had the option to not have my photo taken. But I wanted to ask Mr. Mina, I think this is best posed to you, and let me know if I'm wrong about that. A 2023 GAO report titled Facial Recognition Services Federal Law Enforcement Agencies Should Take Actions to Implement Training and Policies for Civil Liberties indicated that CBP had not assessed whether staff had appropriate skills and competencies to use facial recognition services. Can you explain whether this is still an accurate conclusion?
I think I'd actually, Mrs. Sabatino just raised it in her testimony about the training that's being developed for April 2024.
So the training that has not yet gone into effect. Okay.
The training has been under development, and we expect implementation in April 2024. I will say, I think it's specifically training for facial recognition technology, but a lot of the elements of that are covered in the overarching training that we do today. But we are consolidating that and working with our Office of Training and Development specific to that specific technology.
And relatedly, is it your sense that the people who are running these FRT searches, I'll describe them as, that they're aware of this sort of generalized 2019 guidance that Mr. Mina mentioned regarding the use of biometric data in the First Amendment context?
We do quite a bit of outreach with our teams with respect to a variety of the different challenges that have been raised to us in terms of our application of our authorities and the regulations that we uphold. So I think in refining this specific training for April 2024, I think it will enhance our ability to target our frontline officers.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Gilchrist?
So each of you have described in your testimony today internal recommendations and guidance that you have. Would any of you want to share if you think any of that guidance or those recommendations could work as good policy recommendations for our country?
I would just say, I think, without sort of trying to legislate for the country, I think that the facial recognition directive is a great model for how the department or government agencies think about how to use the technology. Again, I think that as we've all kind of highlighted, one of the important parts of this is both forward and backward looking. Looking at our existing uses as well as thinking about how do we build this out going forward. I think that one of the things that my office is really keen on is you heard me say the early and often. So like for example, I'm at CBP or I'm at TSA. And I think, hey, I have this new technology I want to develop, or I want to utilize some commercially available technology, and that obviously touches on other parts of the department as well. But how do I do that? How do I go about doing that? I think there might be civil rights or civil liberties implications,
Sure.
And that's where we get involved. And then throughout that life cycle of that particular technology or program or policy, we're involved every step of the way. And I think that's really the model, not just at DHS, but I think sort of around in other places too.
Great. Anybody else want to comment on that?
And I do think, as Mr. Lim outlined, we have a very unique business use case from what traditionally other law enforcement partners, right? We're not going out and looking for individuals. We are encountering very legitimate travel through ports of entry. But I think certainly in the framework, and as I mentioned, we do a lot of work with organizations as well as federal partners to share best practices. I think the partnership we have just within DHS and TSA and sharing, the technology that we use, the testing results that we have, and I think a phenomenal platform through S&T in DHS to help share those best practices, but also I think our lessons learned are important to share with our colleagues, not just our best practices. What have we learned through this process, and how have we improved because of the challenges that we've identified?
I have a. Do you have a?
No, that's good.
Okay. I just have a follow-up question regarding privacy and who keeps the data that is being collected, because I know you mentioned that for non-citizens it goes and it's stored for, what did you say, 75 years? And then also for citizens it gets stored for 72 hours, I think is what you said? 24?
It's less than 12 hours. And
Less than
often
12, okay.
Deleted pretty quickly.
I'll correct that. Less than 12 hours for U.S. citizens and 75 years for non-citizens. So who keeps that data?
That is actually stored. It's a DHS system. IDENT. Please don't ask me what the acronym actually stands for.
Okay.
It's been around a while. But a lot of policy and system of record notices that support the retention of that data. I do know it's something that is been evaluated for the timeframes that the data is currently held. It is, certainly a tool that we use to identify photos for individuals who have previous DHS encounters that we use to help build galleries at times for the TVS system.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question, is what is it ultimately used for, that database?
I would defer to DHS. I don't know that Peter is the right person, or if we have someone to speak to the totality of the IDENT system.
I think we could take that as a get back, Madam Chairperson.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Jones?
Yeah. Would one of the panelists please identify whether DHS has a process or issues guidance for how FRT funding grant recipients, including subrecipients, contractors, subcontractors, are responsible for complying with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically Title VI?
So first of all, just as it relates to Title VI enforcement generally, that is a responsibility of my office. We have a whole group that actually does look at Title VI enforcement, and we work with our partners. A lot of our grant making is obviously through the Federal Emergency Management Administration, and so we work really closely with our colleagues in FEMA to make sure that we are enforcing the requirements of Title VI. And then I think I would say, again, I think we can also take sort of the specifics about facial recognition as a get back, but I think that there is, across the board, that there's no special delineation based on one use case versus another. I think our goal really is to make sure that we are ensuring that Title VI is enforced in a meaningful way for DHS grantees and recipients of federal financial assistance.
So there's no, your testimony is that there's nothing specific to facial recognition technology in particular?
There's not I think if I'm understanding your question, Commissioner, there's not a special policy as it relates to Title VI enforcement and facial recognition. No, there isn't. I think it's just a matter of at least at this point, it's a matter of our general enforcement of the statute.
Yeah, but doesn't it seem to you that there ought to be a specific policy for FRT?
So I think that's probably a broader conversation in the department. But I think what I would say to that is that I think that there are, in any of our interactions with our federal grantees or recipients of federal financial assistance, I think it's important for us to stress the importance of Title VI. Enforcement, adherence, and that's really the responsibility of our office and as a department. And so I think that, yes, I hear you, and I respect the idea that facial recognition is a part of that picture. I just don't know that it's a picture unto itself, if that makes sense.
I hear your testimony.
I'm going to turn to the commissioners on the phone if there are any questions.
No questions.
Okay. I have one last thought or one question here. Is there an effort to coordinate, policies and procedures and training and practices across all of DHS, or is everyone talking to each other?
I think the answer to that is yes, Chairwoman. I think that we are.
Okay.
I think that the directive is certainly a launching pad for that. But yes, I think that's, I mean, again, as the department's officer at civil liberties, that's our responsibility. And I think that we are, as the secretary said, we're a department of partnerships. And so I think that that really is how we work as a department, is to really, reach across and say, all right, but again, I think to pick up on, and Dad, I think this might be what you might say, is, it does, some of the training and some of the guidance is going to be use case specific. And so I just want to be mindful of that as we sort of think about what the enterprise looks like. But yes, I think that we are talking to one another. And again, even with a department this large and this diverse, we're making sure that whether that's through the directive or through our own sort of advice and enforcement mechanisms, that we are sort of cutting across in the way that you're describing.
Yeah, because go ahead.
I just wanted to acknowledge that we do have a biometric steering committee meeting that consists of countless individuals across the department. I think the last attendee list was about 128 different individuals that participated from different offices across DHS. But we also have a smaller group with the Office of Biometric Identity Management, TSA, CIS, and CBP, as well as the CIO's office, the management office that has an executive steering committee as well in the smaller group, where we do discuss the operationalization, and facial has been a very big part of that, though it's not the only modality that we talk about.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, for me, it's just like you have American citizens interacting with these agencies on a regular basis, right? When you're flying into the country or you're entering a port of entry, we're interacting with OFO. We're interacting with TSA. I don't think the vast majority of Americans are aware that they can opt out. I opt out, but it's always a gamble. I don't know what reaction I'm going to get. But I think that having uniformity and information at TSA and OFO, you can opt out. It's not an issue. It's not going to cause you any problems. I think that's just like a small thing, right? But I appreciate what you all are trying to do, and I think uniformity, where you can have uniformity, is really critical, because I do think these technologies can lead to safer communities, but we just have to make sure that we're balancing it with civil liberties and civil rights protections. So, Commissioner Jones, would you like to be recognized?
I would. I've got two additional questions.
Okay.
While we still have a little bit of time. The first is, and again, this is for anyone to answer on the panel, are DHS facial recognition grant funding recipients required to conduct periodic, ideally independent audits of the use and accuracy of their facial recognition technology programs?
So I want to do a little bit of homework on that, Commissioner Jones, if that's okay. I think that, while there are certainly, as I mentioned in the directive, like certain requirements that apply sort of across the board, federal, state, local, territorial, again, people who interface with the department, I want to make sure I answer your question accurately and completely.
And just as a follow-up to that,
Yeah.
to that question, and I appreciate your getting back to us on that. I mean, DHS does have the authority to implement some kind of rule saying that if you are going to receive our funding for purposes of using facial recognition technology, these are the expectations that we have of you. Isn't that correct?
I think with any grant, like as you say, there's certainly expectations that we can set for the grantee.
And then, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, my other question is, can someone describe the process of sharing facial recognition technology with state and local partners, and what that looks like? Because we know that FRT, at least in the law enforcement context, is just given the nature of federalism and the way our criminal justice system is, mostly done at the state and local level.
So again, I think that open up to my colleagues here, I think that varies based on the use case, excuse me. And so a lot of the use cases that you've heard about today are pretty DHS specific. So, I don't know, like, for example, I don't think that there is necessarily broad sharing of that technology, sort of outside the proverbial four walls of the department. If I'm understanding your question correctly.
I imagine like the NYPD, for example, which has its own counterterrorism unit, is working with DHS on some of this stuff.
I think there's probably broad, and I'll use this term generally, I think there's broader information sharing, certainly. But I want to be careful about, misstating whether or not there's actual, hey, we're using technology X or algorithm Y. You should use it too, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all the panelists for your testimony because I hear no more questions at this point. I appreciate your testimony, answering our questions, and look forward to hearing back from you all on some of the questions that we asked here today. I would like for you all to go over to the sign after we close up so we can take a photo. We really do appreciate you being here. So we're going to go ahead and break for 1 hour for lunch and reconvene promptly at 1:50 p.m. for our next panel.
Thank you.